It was a bone-chilling night, the kind where the wind howled through the trees like a starving beast searching for prey. The house stood alone, far from the city, on the edge of a dense and merciless forest. Towering trees loomed over it like silent sentinels, their branches swaying eerily in the dim moonlight. James and his wife, Emily, had come here for peace, to escape the relentless chaos of city life. But tonight, the solitude felt suffocating. It was 3 a.m. Emily bolted upright in bed, her heart pounding. She wasn't sure what had woken her, but a strange unease wrapped around her like a heavy fog. The room was drowned in darkness, with only the faint glow of the digital clock cutting through. She reached out and shook James, gently. "James, wake up," he mumbled and turned over. "What is it? Did you hear that?" she whispered. James rubbed his eyes and listened. There was nothing but silence. Then a faint rustling, like footsteps crunching on dry leaves. The sound came from outside, near the trees. He sat up, probably just the wind. Go back to sleep. But Emily wasn't convinced. There was something off about the sound, deliberate, not random, slow, cautious. James exhaled and threw off the blanket. "I'll check it out." He grabbed the flashlight from the nightstand and moved toward the window. As he shone the beam outside, he scanned the edge of the forest. Nothing. The wind picked up, sending a shiver down his spine. He was about to step back when he saw it. Movement at the very edge of the light. A shadow, tall, motionless. His breath caught in his throat. Then, as if sensing his gaze, the figure shifted and melted into the trees. James' stomach twisted with unease. "Stay here," he murmured, reaching for the baseball bat by the bed. "Lock the door." Emily's eyes widened with fear. "James, no, it's probably just an animal. I won't be long." Before she could stop him, he was gone. As he stepped into the hallway, the air felt heavy, oppressive, as if something unseen was lurking just beyond his vision. The floor creaked under his weight as he descended the stairs. The entire house was steeped in eerie silence, broken only by the soft sighs of the wind. James unlocked the front door, hesitated for a moment, then stepped onto the porch. The cold air bit at his skin. As he cast the flashlight toward the trees, the mist began to curl around him like grasping fingers. "Who's there?" he called out. His voice was swallowed by the night. No answer. He took a step forward, gripping the bat tightly. The trees stood like frozen giants, their skeletal limbs reaching skyward. The fog thickened. Then he saw it, a shadow, standing in the mist, tall, unmoving, watching. James' blood ran cold. "Who are you?" he demanded, taking another step closer. The figure didn't move. Its form seemed to waver, as though it were more shadow than flesh. Then, in a grotesque, unnatural motion, it twisted its head, completely upside down. James stumbled backward, his breath hitching in his throat. The figure began to move toward him. One step, then another. The flashlight flickered. James's instincts screamed, "Run!" but his legs refused to move. Then the whisper came, a voice that wasn't his, not Emily's. "Let us in." From behind, the front door creaked open. James spun around, his heart hammering. Emily stood in the doorway, her face drained of color. "James, they're inside." The whispering turned into a low, hissing laughter. Shapes emerged from the darkness, twisted, hollow faces, empty black pits, where eyes should have been. The wind howled as James grabbed Emily's hand and yanked her inside. He slammed the door shut, locking it. His breath came in ragged gasps. Silence. Then a soft, deliberate knock at the door. Once, twice, a third time. Emily gripped his arm tightly. "What do we do?" James was silent, his mind racing. Then the lights flickered, and the whisper returned. "We're already inside." James turned toward the window, his pulse pounding. The reflections staring back at them were not their own. The lights went out, and the screaming began. The screams echoed through the house, piercing the suffocating silence. James and Emily clung to each other, their breaths shallow and frantic. The darkness around them felt alive, pressing in from all sides. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, as if the shadows themselves were speaking. "James, what's happening?" Emily's voice trembled, her nails digging into his arm. "I don't know," he whispered back. his eyes darting around the room. The flashlight in his hand flickered, casting erratic beams of light that only deepened the sense of dread. "We need to get out of here." The knocking on the door had stopped, but the air was thick with tension. The house seemed to groan, as if it were alive and aware of the intruders. James tightened his grip on the baseball bat and pulled Emily toward the back door. "Stay close to me," he said, his voice low but firm. They moved through the kitchen, their footsteps muffled by the eerie silence. The back door was just ahead, but as James reached for the handle, the whispers erupted into a cacophony of voices, hissing, laughing, pleading. The door rattled violently, as if something on the other side was trying to break in. James froze. "We can't go out there." Emily's eyes widened. "Then where do we go?" Before James could answer, the lights flickered again and the shadows in the room began to shift. The figures they had seen earlier, the hollow faces, the empty eyes, materialized from the darkness, their forms twisting and contorting unnaturally. They moved closer, their whispers merging into a single, deafening command. "Let us in." James grabbed Emily's hand and pulled her toward the stairs. Upstairs. Now, they raced up the steps, the whispers following them like a relentless tide. The second floor was no safer. The shadows here were thicker, more menacing. The doors to the bedrooms creaked open on their own, revealing nothing but impenetrable darkness. "James, we're trapped," Emily cried, her voice breaking. James's mind raced. He remembered the attic, a small, cramped space they had never used. It was their only hope. This way. They stumbled down the hallway, the shadows closing in behind them. James yanked open the attic door and pushed Emily inside. He followed, slamming the door shut and locking it. The attic was pitch black, the air stale and heavy. James fumbled with the flashlight, but it flickered and died, plunging them into complete darkness. For a moment, there was silence. Then the whispers began again, soft at first, but growing louder. They seemed to come from every direction, echoing off the walls and ceiling. Emily's voice was barely audible over the whispers. "What are they?" "I don't know," he replied, his voice shaking. "But we can't let them in. We can't." The whispers grew more intense, more urgent. The door to the attic rattled, and James braced himself against it, his heart pounding. Emily clung to him, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps. Then suddenly, the whispers stopped. The silence was deafening. James and Emily held their breath, waiting. The door remained still, the shadows outside seemingly frozen. For a moment, they dared to hope that it was over. But then, the whispers returned. This time, from inside the attic. James's blood ran cold. He turned slowly, his eyes straining to see in the darkness. The whispers were coming from the far corner of the room, where an old, dusty mirror stood. "James." Emily's voice was barely a whisper. "What's in the mirror?" He didn't want to look, but he couldn't help himself. He crept toward the mirror, his heart pounding in his chest. As he approached, the whispers grew louder, more distinct. He could almost make out words, names, pleas, threats. When he reached the mirror, he shone the flickering flashlight at it. The reflection staring back at him was not his own. It was one of the hollow-faced figures, its empty eyes fixed on him, its mouth twisted into a grotesque smile, and it whispered, "We're already inside." James stumbled backward, dropping the flashlight. The attic was plunged into darkness once more, and the whispers erupted into a deafening roar. The door behind them burst open, and the shadows poured in, their forms twisting and writhing like smoke. Emily screamed, and James grabbed her, pulling her into the corner. They huddled together, their backs against the wall. As the shadows closed in, the whispers became a single unified voice, echoing in their minds. "You can't escape." James closed his eyes, holding Emily tightly. He didn't know what to do, where to go. The shadows were everywhere, inside and out. There was no escape. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the noise stopped, the whispers faded, the shadows receded, and the attic was silent once more. James and Emily sat there, trembling, for what felt like hours. When they finally dared to open their eyes, the attic was empty. The door was closed, the mirror was still, and the whispers were gone. But the feeling of being watched remained. They didn't speak as they made their way downstairs. The house was quiet, the air still heavy with unease. James checked every room, every corner, but there was no sign of the shadows or the figures. Emily collapsed onto the couch, her face pale and drawn. "What just happened, James?" He shook his head, his mind racing. "I don't know, but we can't stay here. We need to leave." Emily nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I just want to go home." James sat beside her, pulling her into his arms. We'll leave first thing in the morning." But as they sat there, holding each other, they both knew the truth. The shadows weren't gone, they were waiting. The first light of dawn crept through the windows, pale and weak, as if even the sun feared to touch the house. James and Emily hadn't slept. They sat huddled together on the couch, their bodies stiff with exhaustion, their minds still ringing with the whispers of the night. Emily's fingers trembled as she clutched her coffee mug. "We need to leave, James. Now." James nodded, his eyes bloodshot. "We will, as soon as we pack a few things." Neither of them wanted to admit the truth, that they were afraid to move, afraid to step beyond the fragile illusion of safety the daylight provided. The house was too quiet now, the silence itself a taunt. James forced himself to stand. "I'll get our bags." He moved upstairs, each step creaking under his weight, the sound too loud in the stillness. The hallway stretched before him, the doors to the bedrooms slightly ajar, as if something had been peering out. He shook off the thought and hurried into their room, grabbing the duffel bag from the closet. That's when he saw it. On the wall just above the dresser, 3 long scratches ran down the wallpaper, deep, deliberate, like claws had been dragged through it. His breath hitched. They hadn't been there before. A soft creak came from behind him. James spun around. The room was empty, but the air felt wrong. Thick, stale, like something was breathing just out of sight. He grabbed their clothes in a frenzy, stuffing them into the bag, his pulse roaring in his ears. He needed to get out of this room, now. As he turned to leave, the bedroom door slammed shut. James's heart stopped. The temperature in the room plummeted, his breath coming out in white puffs. The shadows in the corners of the room deepened, swirling like ink in water. Then, from within the darkness, a shape emerged, tall, emaciated, its limbs too long, its face a hollow void. It tilted its head and whispered, "You can't leave." James stumbled back, his back hitting the dresser. The thing took a step forward, its movements jerky, unnatural. The whispers started again, not just from the figure, but from the walls, the floor, the ceiling, voices overlapping, hissing, laughing. "Stay with us. We're so lonely. Let us in." James's vision blurred. The room spun. He couldn't breathe. Then, a scream ripped through the house. "Emily!" The sound snapped him back to reality. He lunged for the door, throwing his weight against it. It didn't budge. The figure was closer now, its skeletal fingers stretching toward him. James grabbed the lamp from the nightstand and hurled it at the window. Glass shattered. Cold air rushed in. Without thinking, he climbed onto the sill and jumped. He hit the ground hard, pain shooting up his legs, but he didn't stop. He ran, limping, toward the stairs. Emily, she wasn't in the living room. The coffee mug lay shattered on the floor. "Emily!" His voice was raw with panic. A whimper came from the kitchen. James sprinted toward it, skidding to a stop in the doorway. Emily was on the floor, her back pressed against the cabinets, her face streaked with tears. In front of her, the refrigerator door was open, but instead of food, the shelves were filled with teeth. Human teeth, hundreds of them, yellowed and broken, piled like grotesque trophies, and written on the inside of the door in what looked like dried blood, "We're hungry." Emily sobbed. I just opened it," and James grabbed her arm, yanking her up. "We're leaving now." They ran for the front door. James twisted the knob. It didn't move, locked. He threw his shoulder against it. Once, twice. The wood groaned but held. Emily's breath came in short, panicked gasps. "James," a sound cut her off. A slow, wet dragging from the hallway. They turned. Something was crawling toward them. At first, James thought it was an animal, a starved, mangy dog. But as it moved into the light, he realized it was humanoid. Its limbs bent at impossible angles. Its skin stretched taut over bone. Its mouth was too wide, filled with jagged, needle-like teeth, and it was smiling. Emily screamed. James grabbed a chair and smashed it against the door's window. Glass rained down. He shoved Emily through, then climbed out after her, slicing his palms on the shards. They didn't look back. They ran to the car, James fumbling with the keys. The engine roared to life. He slammed the pedal down, tires screeching as they tore down the driveway. In the rearview mirror, the house stood silent, but in the upstairs window, a shadow watched and waved. The car raced down the winding forest road, trees blurring into a solid wall of darkness on either side. James's hands were slick with sweat on the steering wheel, his knuckles white. Emily sat rigid in the passenger seat, her breath shallow, her fingers digging into the armrest. Neither of them spoke. The silence was worse. Every shadow outside the car seemed to move. Every rustle of leaves sounded like footsteps. The headlights cut through the fog, but the road ahead felt endless, like they were driving in circles. Then, thud, something hit the roof of the car. Emily gasped, her body jerking. James's foot slammed the brake, sending them lurching forward. The tires screeched, the smell of burnt rubber filling the air. What the hell was that? Emily's voice was shrill. James didn't answer. His eyes were locked on the rear-view mirror. The back seat was empty, but the roof, something was up there. They could hear it, scraping like claws dragging slowly over metal. Then, a low, wet gurgle, like something choking on its own breath. Emily whimpered, "Drive, drive." James hit the gas. The car surged forward. For a second, the scraping stopped. Then crack, a hand smashed through the driver's side window. Long, skeletal fingers, skin peeling like old parchment, wrapped around James's throat. Emily screamed. James swerved, the car fishtailing. The grip on his neck tightened, nails digging into his flesh. He gagged, his vision spotting. With one desperate jerk of the wheel, he sent the car skidding sideways. The thing yanked him backward. His seatbelt snapped. Emily grabbed his arm, pulling with all her strength. "James," the creature hissed, its breath rancid, like rotting meat. Its face pressed against the broken window. There were no eyes, just hollow, weeping sockets. Its jaw unhinged, rows of jagged teeth, glistening with saliva. "You should have let us in." James's free hand fumbled for the door handle. He kicked once, twice, and with a final, violent shove, he threw himself against the door. It flew open. The thing lost its grip. James tumbled out, rolling onto the asphalt. The car screeched to a halt. Emily was out in an instant, running to him. "James, oh God, are you?" He coughed, his throat burning. I'm okay." They both turned to the car. The back seat was empty. The roof was untouched, but the shattered window and the deep, bloody scratches on James's neck, they were real. They drove in silence for another hour before they saw the flickering neon sign. Gas, food, last stop for 50 miles. James pulled in, his hands shaking. The attendant, an old man with sunken eyes, watched them from behind the counter like he'd been expecting them. Emily wrapped her arms around herself. "We need to call the police. Or someone." James nodded, but his gut twisted. What would they even say? As he stepped inside, the old man spoke without looking up. "Y'all came from the Holloway house, didn't ya?" James froze. "How did you know?" The man chuckled, a dry, rattling sound. "Ain't the first, won't be the last." He finally looked up, his milky eyes locking onto James's. "That land's cursed, built on a burial ground, but not for humans. Something older." Emily's voice trembled. What was buried there? The old man leaned in, his breath reeking of tobacco and decay. "The thing that wears dead skin." A beat of silence. Then from outside, Emily turned. A face was pressed against the glass. Her own face, smiling. The gas station's flickering neon sign buzzed like a dying insect, casting a sickly glow over Emily's doppelganger. Its face, her face, pressed against the glass, lips stretching into a smile too wide, too many teeth. "James," it whispered in Emily's voice. "Let me in." Emily stumbled back, her breath coming in ragged gasps. That's not me." The old man behind the counter didn't move, just sighed, like he'd seen this before. "Told you, it wears what it eats." James's skin crawled. He grabbed Emily's arm and yanked her toward the car. "We're leaving now." But as they sprinted outside, the thing was gone. Only the wind howled in response. They drove in silence, the road stretching endlessly before them. Emily kept checking the mirrors, expecting to see herself staring back. Then James scratched his forearm. Something clicked under his skin. He froze, looked down. A small white tip poked through a split in his flesh. A tooth. Emily's face drained of color. "James, what the hell?" He dug his fingernails into his arm and pulled. The skin split like wet paper. Dozens of tiny, jagged teeth spilled into his lap, clattering like broken porcelain. Emily screamed. James's hands shook as he stared at the teeth embedded in his flesh. They weren't his. They were theirs. The ones from the fridge. "We're hungry." The whispers hissed in his mind. The car's radio crackled to life. Static. Then, "You can't run, James." Emily's voice. But Emily wasn't speaking. They crashed back into the gas station, James clutching his bleeding arm. The old man didn't look surprised. "Y'all got two choices," he rasped. "Die runnin' or fight." Emily's voice came from the shadows. "Let us in, James." James's vision swam. The teeth in his arm itched. "How do we kill it?" The old man leaned in, his breath reeking of decay. "It's not one thing, it's many, and they're already inside you." James looked down. His veins pulsed black. The old man slid a rusted knife across the counter. "Cut him out before they hatch, or burn him alive." Emily grabbed the knife. "Do it." James hesitated. Then the real screaming started. From inside him, James' skin rippled. Something squirmed beneath the surface. A slow, pulsing movement that made his flesh bulge unnaturally. He could feel them now, the things inside him, their needle-like teeth scraping against his bones from within. Emily's hands trembled as she gripped the rusted knife. "We have to get them out. Now." James nodded, sweat dripping down his face. He rolled up his sleeve, revealing veins blackened like rotting roots. His skin had taken on a sickly gray hue, the texture rough and wrong, like old parchment stretched too thin. The first cut was the deepest. The knife slid in, and black, tar-like blood oozed out. James bit back a scream as Emily dug the blade deeper, peeling back his skin like the rind of a rotten fruit. And then, click, click, click. Tiny skeletal fingers pushed through the wound. Emily gagged as a small, malformed thing wriggled free from James's arm, a grotesque, half-formed creature, its body a twisted mockery of a human infant, its mouth a gaping maw of jagged teeth. It let out a wet, gurgling shriek before collapsing onto the gas station floor, twitching, but it wasn't alone. More movement, more splitting. James's body was a nest. Emily stumbled back, her breath coming in panicked gasps. The thing on the floor giggled, a sound too human, too familiar. It was her voice. From outside, the trees rustled, shadows shifted, and then from the darkness, she stepped forward. Not the mimic, not the doppelganger, but Emily, or what was left of her. Her skin hung in tattered strips, her jaw unhinged, her eyes hollow. She smiled, her teeth blackened and broken. "You left me behind," the thing that wore Emily's corpse whispered. The real Emily's blood turned to ice. Because she remembered now. She remembered the thing in the house peeling her skin off like a glove. She remembered watching James run without her. And she remembered dying. The old man behind the counter began to laugh, a wet, choking sound. His skin sloughed off in chunks, revealing something older beneath. The walls of the gas station pulsed like a living thing. The floorboards breathed, and then the teeth started growing from the ceiling, the walls, the air itself. James's body convulsed as the things inside him hatched, one after another, their tiny clawed hands tearing through muscle and sinew. He collapsed, his screams drowned out by the sound of chewing. Emily, the real Emily, stood frozen as the thing wearing her face stepped closer, its fingers brushing her cheek. "You were always one of us," it whispered. And then Emily remembered the truth. She had never escaped the house. The flickering neon light of the petrol pump buzzed like a dying wasp. its sickly glow highlighting the horror unfolding inside. Emily stood frozen, her breath erratic, body trembling, while the walls around her pulsed as if they were alive. The old man, standing behind the counter, was no longer human. His skin had peeled off in wet strips, and what lay beneath was something Emily's mind refused to accept. His jaw opened with a wet, cracking sound, far wider than any human limit, and inside, multiple rows of long needle-like teeth gleamed. "You see now, don't you?" whispered the creature hiding behind Emily's face. Its voice was Emily's own, but grotesque and hollow. Its fingers touched Emily's cheek, the touch cold and unnatural. "You've always been here, with us." Emily's hands went to her head, as if trying to stop some pain, and then memories burst forth. Memories that weren't hers, that weren't human, watching from the shadows, as people entered that house again and again, feeding on their fear, their flesh, their souls, as the thing inside her continued to grow, forgetting everything each time, only to remember again when a new feast began. She collapsed to the ground, her knees giving out. No, this can't be real. But the teeth embedded in the walls began to chatter in delight, and from beneath the floor came the wet, fleshy sounds. The petrol pump wasn't a building, it was alive, and it was hungry. James's body began to twist on the ground, his spine cracking with a horrific sound. His skin split open like a ruptured fruit, and what came out wasn't blood, but black, writhing tendrils, slithering toward Emily. "Emily." James's voice emerged from the shadows, now consuming his corpse. "Become part of us." The Emily-shaped creature smiled and opened its mouth. It wasn't a human mouth. It was a dark pit, filled with teeth. "You are one of us. You always were." Emily stepped back, her breath rapid, heart trembling. "No, this isn't me. This isn't real." But then, her fingers began to itch. She looked down. Her nails had turned black, growing into dagger-like claws. Her skin began to tighten, as if something underneath wanted to emerge. "No, no, no." The whispers grew louder, drowning out her protest. "Let us in. You are ours. You always were." 10 years. She had been trapped in that house for 10 years. Each night, she fought against the darkness, trembling at the sound of her own breath. The walls whispered to her, "Emily, we're coming inside," until she could no longer tell whether the voices were hers or someone else's. Then, one evening, 2 strangers knocked on the decaying door. Daniel Carter, a paranormal investigator who didn't believe in ghosts, at least not until now. Sophia Reyes, a psychologist who specialized in trauma cases, drawn to the house by rumors of the woman who never aged. They found Emily chained in the basement, her wrists wounded and her eyes wild with decades of fear. Emily lunged at them, her voice a broken scream. "Run, this house. It's not just a building." Daniel tried to unlock the rusted shackles while Sophia stared at Emily's face. Her nails were blackened, far too long, no longer human. "How long have you been here?" Sophia asked gently. Emily's lips trembled. I don't remember." Then, a wet, dragging sound came from the stairs above. Daniel's flashlight beam cut through the darkness, illuminating the staircase. Something was coming down. Long, slender fingers curled around the railing, bone white, with too many joints. "We have to get out. Now," Sophia whispered, pulling Emily toward the back door. But the door was sealed shut, the wood pulsing like living flesh. "It won't let us out," Emily said softly. "It never does." To find out what happened to Daniel and Sophia and how they ended up near Emily, stay tuned for the next part. Share your real experiences in the comments and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more videos like this.